All right, let's do something amazing. We're going to travel back in time, way, way back, 7 million years, to uncover the incredible story of, well, us. How did we get here? Let's jump in. So, to get started, let's look at our closest living relatives on the planet, chimpanzees. Now, you might be surprised to learn that we share a whopping 98% of our DNA with them. That's right, just a tiny 2% difference in our genetic code. But hang on a second. Before you start thinking we're just chimps and shoes, get this. You also share about 40% of your DNA with a banana. So yeah, that 98% number is a big deal, but it clearly doesn't tell the whole story, does it? Which brings us right to our big question. If it's not just about our DNA percentage, what are the key biological changes that actually made us human? What clues did our ancestors leave behind that put them on a totally different path? Well, that's exactly what we're about to find out. You can think of paleoanthropologists, the scientists who study our past, as fossil detectives. They can't get DNA from millions of years ago, so instead, they look for specific clues in the skeletons of our ancient relatives. Clues that point to three huge shifts in our evolution. The very first, and you could argue the most important of these shifts, was bipedalism. Now, that's just a fancy word for the ability to walk upright on two legs. See, as Africa's climate was changing and forests were shrinking, being able to walk efficiently across open ground was a massive advantage. It's something we totally take for granted, but learning to stride like we do was a revolutionary step. It literally reshaped our entire body. Okay, so this is where the detective work gets really cool. First, look at the skull. The hole where your spinal cord connects, it's called the foramen magnum, it moved from the back of the skull to right underneath. This lets you balance your head perfectly without needing massive neck muscles. Second, our legs got longer than our arms, and our knees began to angle inward. That's the key to balancing on one leg while the other one swings forward. And third, our feet completely changed. We lost that ape-like big toe that could grab onto branches, and it moved in line with the others, giving us that powerful push-off for every single step. The second big clue is right in our mouths. Great apes, they have these large jaws with long, sharp canine teeth. Their teeth are in a U shape. But our ancestors, they started to have smaller jaws, way smaller canines, and a more rounded, parabolic dental arcade. You can actually feel a little bit of that history right now. If you feel above your canine tooth, that little bump on your gums, that's from the giant root that tooth used to have. And the third major change, and this one came much, much later in the game, was the brain boom. I mean, this chart says it all. The brain of an early ancestor like an Australopithecus wasn't that much bigger than a chimp's. But then, it just took off, eventually tripling in size to what we have between our ears today. Okay, so we know what clues the detectives are looking for. Now, let's use those clues to actually meet some of the most famous members of our ancient family. This timeline here is going to be our roadmap. We're going to start way back at 7 million years ago and travel forward, checking out some key players and seeing some mind-blowing fossil evidence that tells their story and ours. Our journey begins with one of the oldest potential members of the human family we've ever found. We call our family hominids, and this is the skull of Sahelanthropus. It's super old, it's pretty bashed up, but it holds one critical clue. That little hole for the spinal cord we talked about, the foramen magnum, it's positioned forward, and that is a huge hint that this creature living 7 million years ago was already beginning to walk on two legs. This, right here, is one of the most incredible discoveries in the history of science. These aren't bones. They are footprints. Footprints left behind by a couple of early hominins as they walked through wet volcanic ash that later hardened into solid rock. This is a 3.6 million-year-old snapshot, direct proof of our ancestors walking upright. It's just incredible to imagine. And this brings us to probably the most famous fossil ancestor of all time, Lucy. Discovered in Ethiopia, her 3.2 million-year-old skeleton is so important because it's this perfect mix of old and new. She had very ape-like features, like long arms for climbing trees, but her pelvis and her angled-in knees were absolutely built for walking upright. She is the perfect fossil to introduce a really crucial idea. And that idea is called mosaic evolution. Think of it like this. Human traits didn't all just show up at once in some perfect package. It was more like building something piece by piece. You get the ability to walk upright first, and then much later, you get the big brain. Our evolution works the same way, with different traits evolving at different speeds over millions and millions of years. Now, this idea of mosaic evolution is so important because it helps us completely tear down the biggest myth about human evolution. You have definitely seen this picture before. It's called the March of Progress. It shows evolution as this nice, neat, straight line with one species smoothly turning into the next, and of course, with us at the very end. It's a powerful image, and it is completely wrong. The reality is so much more complex and honestly a lot more interesting. Our family tree isn't a ladder at all. It's more like a dense, messy bush with tons of different branches. Often, multiple hominid species were living at the exact same time. Some were our direct ancestors, sure, but many others were our evolutionary cousins that eventually went extinct. So, just how messy was it? Well, as of right now, scientists have identified as many as 22 different species of hominids on our family bush. It was a crowded planet for a very long time. And here's the perfect example to drive that point home. Our most famous cousins, the Neanderthals. They were not a dumber, hunched-over version of us. They were their own, separate, very successful species that was incredibly well adapted to the cold of Ice Age Europe. They even had, on average, slightly larger brains than we do. And DNA evidence has confirmed it. They were a distinct branch on the bush, our cousins, not our ancestors. So with all this complexity, all these branches on the bush, is there one single thread that connects our entire 7 million year story? Absolutely. And it all begins in one place. For the first 5 million years of our evolutionary journey, from Sahelanthropus all the way up to the first members of our own genus, Homo, the entire story, every single chapter, played out exclusively on the continent of Africa. It wasn't until around 1.7 million years ago that we see the first evidence of hominids venturing out into the rest of the world. And even then, our own species, Homo sapiens, first evolved in Africa, long before we spread across the globe. You know, more than 150 years ago, Charles Darwin predicted that because our closest living relatives, chimps and gorillas, are in Africa, that's probably where our story began too. And every single piece of evidence we have found since then, from the oldest fossils to the most modern genetic studies, has proven him right. Fundamentally, we all share a recent African origin. And all of that leaves us with one final fascinating question. For millions and millions of years, the Earth was home to several different kinds of humans, all at the same time. But today, there's only one. So why did our branch of the family bush, Homo sapiens, survive, while all the others disappeared?